Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone to the second session of our global webinar series 2024 on the theme Key Considerations in the Energy Transition, a spotlight on infrastructure, gender and governance. Thank you for joining us from wherever you are. It's a great pleasure to have you all here. My name is Sadhika Shashi-Prabhu and I work with the United Nations Environment Programme in the Disasters and Conflicts branch based in Geneva, Switzerland. And I'm a legal officer under the partnership between UNEP and the Government of Norway. The primary objective of this collaboration is strengthening national capacities to reduce environmental and pollution risks associated with the oil and gas sector. Our work now increasingly looks at promoting dialogue on the energy transition, especially with a focus on social, environmental, and governance aspects of the transition. Our work involves delivering technical assistance and training to countries as well as undertaking global outreach activities that address environmental safeguards in the energy sector. Our annual global webinar series aims to spread awareness and encourages multi-stakeholder dialogue about the latest developments in the energy sector. Given the growing global consensus to phase out fossil fuel dependency, and with COP28 laying the groundwork for a just and equitable transition, this year our webinar series is focused on the energy transition and the enabling conditions, including social and environmental considerations. Our second session is Bridging the Gap, Social and Gender Considerations in the Energy Transition. Our conversation will explore gender mainstreaming and employment considerations in this new energy mix. As the employment landscape is poised to shift from fossil fuels to renewables, it is important to facilitate the transfer of knowledge and expertise from one sector to the other. The Paris Agreement also emphasizes the importance of a just transition, one which considers the imperatives of the workforce and creates decent work and quality jobs. This transformation provides an ideal opportunity to increase women's representation in the energy industry. Despite making up 39% of the global labor force, women only account for 16% of the traditional energy sector. This disparity further widens at management levels. Women are also disproportionately affected by the lack of energy access. Today, our discussions with an all-women panel will highlight the vital role that women are playing in decentralized renewable energy solutions. It explores ways to bridge the gap and encourages women's participation and involvement in installation, maintenance, management, and leadership activities. Experiences across global North and global South countries will be shared to show the spectrum of women's engagement in the energy transition. Before we start, I just want to go over some logistics. So this is a reminder that this is a recorded webinar and will be uploaded to our YouTube channel. We will also circulate at the end the link to this to the recording as well as all the PowerPoints used today. We encourage audience participation and ask you to send all your questions and queries into the question box. We will try to answer as many of them during the question answer session. So please feel free to type in. However, given the time constraint, we will not be able to give you the floor. You will also receive a certificate of participation if you stay with us until the end and fill our feedback form. Please also find the PowerPoint and bios of our speakers uploaded in the handout section. Without further ado, it gives me great pleasure to welcome our first speaker, Heidi Lynn Balish. So Heidi Lynn is a seasoned energy professional with over 25 years of experience in offshore and onshore engineering roles. Heidi Lynn is a seasoned energy professional with over 25 years of experience in offshore and onshore engineering roles throughout Canada and the United States. She is the co-founder and CEO of Duat Energy Incorporated, a company dedicated to developing revolutionary biofuels process to produce renewable natural gas to support the energy transition. Heidi Lynn serves on the board of directors for WPC Energy Canada and was the chair of the Women in Industry program for the 24th World Petroleum Congress. She also serves as the Partnership Relationship Manager for the WPC Energy Women's 10X Task Force, an initiative dedicated to accelerating gender parity on a global scale in the energy industry. Heidi Lynn received her Bachelor in Science in Petroleum Engineering from the University of Alberta. Heidi, we welcome you today. Thank you so much for being here and contributing to this webinar.
Thank you. A pleasure to be here with you. What can you see on my screen?
We can see your presentation. It's clear. Thank you.
You can see my presentation? Okay, great. Thank you. All right. So firstly, a warm welcome to everyone and a sincere thank you for attending the webinar and participating in conversations around these important topics. Today, we are facing increasing pressure to build energy security in our ever-changing world. It will take a massive amount of effort, technology, and labor to meet the future demand. Critical for our success is the ability to collaborate across sectors and build a sustainable and equitable workforce. Part of my presentation today will be factual, citing statistics and reports to describe the current state and challenges we are facing in energy. But on the softer side, I will share some of my experiences and personal perspectives. Much of my dialogue will be centered around women in energy. However, I wanted to take this opportunity to highlight that this conversation is for everyone. We are better together. Pictured here is my son and my daughter. It is my personal hope that the upcoming generation can bridge the energy and gender gap together. I'm trying to advance the slide. Can you see my next slide?
No, Heidi, I can't see your next slide.
Okay, there we go. Okay, can you see it now? I wanted to start off by sharing a bit about who I am and what I'm passionate about, as it will serve to set the context for our discussion today. In my almost 30-year career, I have worked globally in the energy industry. After receiving my degree in petroleum engineering, I began my career at an energy supermajor, where I worked as a drilling engineer in both offshore and land operations, focusing on oil and gas production. In the later part of my career, I shifted my attention and skills toward technology development, and then more specifically, digital transformation, and now generative AI solutions. I've always been interested in learning new things and developing my skills, but my main motivation is working with smart and interesting people to solve problems collaboratively and practically. This is what ultimately led me to explore the field of energy transition. A couple of years ago, I was selected to a clean tech accelerator program where I was able to combine my background in energy, technology, and interest in decarbonization. The program focused on developing practical solutions for the energy transition, connecting with industry leaders and experts to innovators in the sector. One of my main takeaways was that people in energy solve energy problems and that skills and experiences are highly transferable. It was through this experience that I was able to co-found a company dedicated to creating a new method for producing renewable natural gas. Side note, I had no previous experience in RNG. However, through collaboration and innovation, we were able to come up with an idea which could play an important role in advancing sustainable energy technology. Now, on a personal level, being a woman in engineering in the energy sector is something that I'm passionate about. I currently serve on the board of directors for WPC Canada, a trusted and inclusive platform for individuals and organizations to gain insights into the requirements of an effective energy transformation. Additionally, I am co-founder of the Women 10X Task Force, an initiative dedicated to accelerating gender parity on a global scale. So this is me on paper. A little bit more detail. When I studied in university, there were less than 10% women in my discipline. And during my tenure on drilling rigs, I was the sole woman in a supervisory role on location. Additionally, for a short time, I was the most senior woman in drilling at Chevron. And in retrospect, this was surprising as I was an entry-level team lead in my early 30s. There was limited diversity and leadership above me. But much has changed since then. Some things have remained slower to progress than I expected. My biggest challenges were juggling my career, raising children, long hours, commuting, and finding time for personal development, all while managing a dual career household. Ultimately, resulting me in moving into a more technical-based role for remote work and more family time. So In this photo, I just wanted to highlight that this is a drill ship that I used to work on. This was offshore on the east coast of Canada. I worked a rotational schedule, so I was 21 days on the rig and then 21 days at home. Okay, so enough about me. Let's move on to the energy context. The escalating global demand for energy underscores the necessity for secure and diversified energy sources, influencing economic stability and social progress worldwide. The move towards diversifying energy not only mitigates the risks with dependency on limited energy types or suppliers, it is pivotal for creating jobs and opening avenues for new industries. Socially, the impacts are transformative, directly correlating with improved quality of life. Secure access to energy is fundamental for households, healthcare, education, and essential services, which in turn supports the broader social well-being and development. Additionally, the evolving energy sector offers a unique opportunity for an inclusive and economic social participation. So just a little bit about this slide. This was taken on a cold, wintry day in Alberta. When we talk about energy transition all around the world, it's going to be different for everyone. What we are doing must factor in regional differences. For example, electric vehicles and wind power can be a challenge in our cold climate. Despite this, there is momentum to diversify our energy production portfolio, even in the most unfavorable conditions. I think it was minus 30 degrees C in this photo. So how does this impact people and our labor market? As energy demand rises, there will be a significant increase in energy-related jobs across both traditional and renewable sectors. The drive towards a diversified and sustainability is poised to dramatically increase employment opportunities, highlighting a period of transformation and growth. One study conducted by the International Renewable Energy Agency indicates the number of energy-related jobs required globally will increase significantly, with estimates ranging from approximately 106 million to 139 million by 2030. Within this time frame, the renewable energy sector is expected to play a vital role in job creation, with the total number of renewable energy jobs forecasted to more than double, from around 17.4 million to 38.2 million. This growth underscores the rising demand for skilled workers in renewable energy and other energy-related sectors as part of a larger shift towards sustainability. The road to energy transition around the globe is profound. We are going to need the best and brightest to solve these challenges, not just 50% of the best and brightest, which means we need to attract and retain women more than ever. So what does the current state look like? Progress around the participation of women in the global energy sector remains frustratingly slow. BCG and WPC Energy have been jointly surveying this since 2017 as part of our Untapped Reserve report. And disappointingly, the report has shown that in the 7 years we have been surveying this sector, participation of women has only increased by 1%. The average percentage of women working in oil and gas has seen a slight increase from 22 to 23% since 2017. EY conducted a survey around the perceptions of all business sectors a few years ago, and the results for energy were not encouraging. 62% of millennials and Gen Z, so that's people born between 1981 and 2012, stated that they find a career in energy unappealing. And around half that percentage, again, described a career in energy as very unappealing. The BCG report uses the term untapped reserves to remind us that, like underdeveloped energy resources, women and other underrepresented groups represent an enormous potential resource. Companies within and beyond the energy sector recognize that diversity is important for delivering better business results and can be a source of a competitive advantage. By integrating diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, Organizations can tap into a wealth of diverse perspectives, experiences, and talents, driving innovation, creativity, and the ability to address complex challenges like energy security and transition. The low representation of women and the reluctance of the younger generation to enter the sector against a global skills shortage is concerning. The case for diversity. The emphasis on diversity enhances an organization's ability to relate to varied stakeholders, ultimately fostering a culture of innovation. Beyond external benefits, DE&I significantly impacts employee engagement and retention. A workplace that values inclusivity tends to attract and retain top talent. Moreover, the link between gender diversity and financial performance is evident, with findings indicating that energy companies with high representation of women in leadership roles experience better financial returns. This correlation, consistent across various sectors, illustrates the tangible benefits of fostering an inclusive environment. Championing diversity not only promotes a healthier, more dynamic workplace, but also contributes directly to a company's bottom line. The good news is that we're seeing some encouraging progress in the renewable sector. According to the International Renewable Energy Agency, women make up about 32% of the workforce. This is higher than the overall representation in the energy sector, but still reveals gender disparity, especially in science, technology, engineering, and math roles. This report advocates for the closing of the gender gap, emphasizing the opportunity to create jobs, a new work culture, and reshape energy production and distribution. A call to action. An additional challenge is losing professionals to other sectors. Just in this past week, a McKinsey report has revealed the labor market in many countries remains as tight as ever. In order to make progress and increase participation of women in energy, we need to understand the reasons why the sector has so few. We believe this could involve the following: the smaller pool of women in science, technology, engineering, and math, the lack of flexibility in the workplace, a lack of support in the home with domestic responsibilities related to childcare and maintaining a household, a lack of career mobility and advancement opportunities for women in energy compared with other sectors. And with fewer women advancing in energy, there are fewer female role models and mentors to attract other women to the profession. Less than 1 in 5 leadership roles are held by women. Promotion-based relocations and/or field experience required to advance, making it difficult for some women to take on operational assignments, and lower wages. According to the World Economic Forum, women working in the energy sector earn wages that are 19% lower than their male counterparts. Interestingly, this wage gap remains consistent even when accounting for factors such as ability, education, potential experience, suggesting that it is not due to gender differences in skill levels. Untapped Reserves report revealed that although men and women are broadly aligned, recognizing the sector poses significant challenges to its female workforce, they continue to attribute different causal factors as being the most responsible. Well, 66% of men say the lack of qualified women in the industry is to blame. 66% of women believe the issue is women being overlooked for promotion. 35% of males surveyed said that women do not bring enough flexibility to the roles, whereas 25% of women agree with this statement. This disparity in perceptions indicates that unconscious bias continues to persist. Unsurprisingly, given these statistics, women are more likely than men to leave the energy sector for other industries. It is evident that the energy sector has a significant challenge in attracting and retaining critical skills and talent. So this photo was taken at the Women in Industry breakfast at the 24th World Petroleum Congress last year, where over 160 people from multiple countries and backgrounds came together to discuss the challenges of attraction and retention of women and share their insights. So what is an effective DE&I strategy? As mentioned earlier, BCG and WPC Energy have been jointly surveying the participation of women in the sector since 2017. The most recent report analyzed the best performing companies, meaning those with the highest levels of female participation. And as a result, several key patterns emerged. Visible commitment from senior leaders is key. The survey found that if male employees think that DE&I is a priority for their CEO, they are 4 times more likely to indicate that it's a personal priority for them as well. To foster a more inclusive and equitable workforce, organizations should promote more positive interactions between genders and addressing the issue of belonging and uncertainty among women by ensuring their inclusion in work-related events. Creating a mentorship culture that pairs senior leaders with junior female employees can further support this effort. Additionally, providing education on gender equity and allyship and encouraging men to challenge discriminatory behaviors and holding people accountable are crucial steps to achieving a more gender inclusive environment. Linking up with colleagues, industry peers, and other stakeholders to create communities of change is critical. This last recommendation is what inspired the creation of the WPC Energy Women 10X Task Force, an initiative dedicated to accelerating gender parity on a global scale in energy through collaboration in industry, academia, and nonprofits. The road ahead. Meeting the human resource capacity necessary to fill these newly created jobs requires an increase in education and training programs, as well as measures aimed at building an inclusive and gender-balanced transition workforce. To facilitate workforce requirements and bridge skill gaps, the energy industry can implement several strategies, developing specialized training programs that focus on innovation, renewable and transitional energy technologies, while leveraging transferable skills from experienced professionals. These programs can offer partnerships with educational institutions to integrate sustainable energy curricula and provide practical opportunities within the existing energy sector. On-the-job training programs allow employees to learn and solve problems in real-world scenarios, while continuously learning initiatives ensure professionals keep pace with industry and innovation. Leveraging technology like online platforms enhances accessibility and offers immersive and accelerated training experiences. Ensuring inclusivity in training programs is crucial to address barriers for women and unrepresented groups. To conclude, with less than a quarter of its global employees being female, the energy sector must prioritize DE&I, as there is a long road ahead to achieve gender parity. To achieve this, we advocate that they continue to support programs proven effective for women advancement, such as remote, hybrid, and flexible working policies, demonstrate strong visible commitment from senior leadership supported by clear accountability, leverage partnerships to support and advance DE&I across the energy sector with joint venture partners, third-party vendors, government agencies, and community initiatives, and offer opportunities to enhance skills and utilize current knowledge in pursuing energy transition projects. So, circling back to the beginning, we are better together. Let's not only bridge the gap, let us also build a thriving, inclusive community to drive innovation and sustainable growth. The inclusion of women in the energy sector is essential for industry progress, enhancing economic performance and addressing talent shortages, leading to a more prosperous and equitable world. And watch this space, we are creating a global task force to continue these efforts. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Harry, for that very interesting presentation. And you mentioned so much about the road ahead and what WPC, the task force, is doing, but you also said that you started your career as being one of the very few women on the drilling rig. How has that changed, and have you noticed any environmental and social considerations that WPC is considering, as well as you at Duat Energy, as you navigate the energy transition? Are you thinking beyond just the gender aspect? What about the other remaining environmental and social considerations?
Okay, great questions. Thank you. So to answer the first part of your question, a lot has changed in the industry around women being in operational roles, women working offshore, women working on rigs. So, you know, when I first started, the rigs weren't really designed with women in mind. It was very hard to have accommodations for women in terms of room accommodations, bathroom quarters, etc. And now rigs are designed to have you know, gender-specific areas. They account for more women being on board and on the ship. So, but you know, these facilities take years to build and construct. So they're doing their designs now with the end in mind that there is going to be diversity in gender on these rigs. So that's one thing that has changed. There is much more reasonable accommodations and an inclusive environment just from a facilities perspective. The next question you had was around what is WPC Energy doing to support the energy transition? Well, we're looking at all aspects of the road ahead. We're looking at the, you know, everything from the traditional energy sector to what's going on in energy transition. And we believe like energy is energy, and it's a continuum of solutions that will have, you know, a different approach globally, and having conversations around that and providing a forum for different organizations to have those conversations is essential. So we include dialogue with energy companies, with nonprofits, with different member countries to understand their challenges and their solutions to navigate the road ahead in energy.
Thank you so much, Heidi. And thank you for your presentation. And there will be so many more questions that we will come back to you in our dedicated question answer session. But for now, I would love to have introduce our second speaker, Maria Ancila Bombande. Maria Ancila Bombande is a gender and development expert at the United Nations University. She's currently working as an administrative associate and as a researcher on several the Institute of Natural Resources in Africa projects, including Just Energy Transition in the Informal Sector, Innovate for Clean Agrotech Technologies, Economic Implications of Stranded Assets, and the African Facility for Transitions Research. Maria has previous experience working as a programs assistant intern at the West Africa Network for Peace Building. She has a BA degree in sociology from the University of Ghana and an MSc in international development studies from the University of Amsterdam. Her area of expertise is on issues related to the gender dynamics of natural resource management. Thank you so much for joining us, Maria. You should have.
Okay. Hopefully you can see my screen. So thank you so much for this opportunity to participate in this important discussion. This is just to give a brief overview of my presentation today. So I first want to start by defining and democratizing what just transitions is from an African perspective. Then I will delve into the importance of gender inclusion in the just transition process. And I will use UN-UNRWA's InfoCat project as a case study. Beyond that, I will highlight some of the work being done on the continent, some of the change makers that are really pushing the just energy transition pathways. And then I'll highlight the challenges they face, and then I'll conclude with some recommendations. So I want to start my presentation by saying that the sustainable implementation of decentralized renewable energy solutions will require more than a technological approach. It will require a holistic strategy to just transitions that engages with local communities and ensures that leave no one behind is not just another buzzword and it's not just another tagline. I wanted to really look at the difference between how just transitions is defined in the global north versus how it is defined in the global south. So the ILO defines just transitions as greening. Minimize this a bit.
Video, okay?
Oh, so sorry, I've lost my screen. Can you still see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen, Maria. Yes, you're on the slide. Yes.
Okay, so I'm just trying to move this dialog box below. Yes, so it defines just transition as greening the economy in a way that is fair and inclusive as possible to everyone concerned, creating decent work opportunities and leaving no one behind. This is an excellent definition of a just transitions, but we need to really look at all forms of justice when we are defining a just transitions. So we want to look at the four main types of justice. We have restorative justice, which essentially talks about redressing past harms and offsetting loss incurred as a result of the transition. We also want to look at recognition justice, which talks about the socio-cultural, economic, and political structures that differ between various contexts, and that not all members of society are valued equally. The third type of justice we really want to examine is the distributive justice, whereby we look at sharing costs and benefits of the transition fairly and equitably. We need to ask ourselves who will pay the cost for this just transition process. And finally, I want to touch on the procedural justice, where we need to ensure that affected parties are meaningfully and continually consulted in the entire just transition process. So, Africa needs to define what a just transition means for us in order to ensure ownership and develop our own transition pathways. This is one of the reasons why INRA developed the Dare to Share Knowledge platform, which we are doing in collaboration with the University of Utrecht. We really wanted to understand what a just transition means for whom and for what. And we organized a workshop last year which brought together multiple and diverse stakeholders, ranging from scientists to policymakers and green entrepreneurs, to delve into exactly what a just transition means for them and not what has already been told or is being passed down onto them. When we organized this workshop, there are a couple of points that were raised, but I just want to highlight 4 of them. The first one being that human rights is a fundamental principle and should be at the center of the efforts to analyze and understand interlinkages that assemble appropriate toolboxes and provide solutions that will drive equitable and sustainable systemic change. The second one is that the dominant economic model of capitalism is not delivering sustainable development, and we need to be aware that the entire debate needs to be recentered, which will have to put people at the center of the discussions rather than a market-based model. The third point is that a just transition that aims for equity must factor in the trade-offs that should be managed equitably. There will be trade-offs on the African continent between climate action and our socio-economic needs. And this needs to be at the forefront of our discussions, and we need to start adopting strategies that will manage these trade-offs effectively. And finally, which we often do not bring to the forefront, is that peace is an essential condition for the transition process. There can be no transition at all if there is an unstable and insecure environment. So really, after this workshop, we developed an Ubuntu definition of what just transition means for Africa. And Ubuntu essentially means being human through other people. There are 6 key factors that were raised, and I want to briefly go over each one. So the first one is collective responsibility and solidarity. Here we really emphasize the role of a just transition process as being collective and one that emphasizes community for all people, ensuring that the most vulnerable members of society are supported and included in the just transition process. The second one is inclusive participation. So here, we really want to look at how all people, including vulnerable people, are put at the forefront of decision-making processes, so that we can have diverse perspectives and opinions. The third one is that the just transition process should be equitable and fair for all people. The fourth one is environmental stewardship. Here, we really need to be mindful of the interconnectedness that people have with their environments. There are cultural elements that tie people to their environments and their communities. And we need to ensure that the practices that will be adopted not only restore the environment, but also manage them in a sustainable way for current and future generations. For the fifth point, which is healing and recognition, we need to acknowledge that past mistakes have been done and work towards a restorative justice for the future. The final Ubuntu point of just transitions is that the human dignity and respect for all people must be ensured and protected at all times. So I want to touch briefly on the importance of gender inclusion in the just transition process. Now here I may be preaching to the converted, because I believe that we all understand why gender inclusion is important for a just transition process, but I think it's important to highlight it once again. And so I want to say that it is important because we need inclusive participation and representations. If we want truly diverse perspectives that will result in long-lasting change, we need to have women at the forefront and at the center and not at the periphery. We cannot continue to adopt gender inclusion as an afterthought. It needs to be central to all transition pathways. The second is that it leads to economic empowerment, not just for women, for the community as a whole. It leads to skills development and uptake. The third thing is that it leads to social equity because you address existing inequalities, and this then leads to reduced poverty. It also leads to environmental sustainability. It's an old adage that if you want society to progress, you actually ask for the opinions of women, because we have been the repository of generational knowledge of traditional methods of environmental sustainability, which lead to climate action. So it is important that female voices are heard during the just transition process. And it also leads to health impacts, because a lot of the unsustainable practices have adverse health effects on not just women, but on the community as a whole. And so their inclusion in the just transition process is important to result in proper health care and benefits. It also leads to eventual gender responsive policies, because we are hoping that it will eventually lead to parity in the legislative process, and it will lead to supportive legislation. And finally, once we achieve all of this, it will hopefully lead to challenging traditional norms. Now, globally, renewable energy has generated 13.7 million jobs in 2023, according to IRENA. And Africa contributed only 2.3% of those jobs, which comes to around 320,000. And there's a huge opportunity for Africa to contribute more to this sector, because we are the host of 30% of the world's green mineral reserves. And the informal sector in Africa is a huge productive sector, which accounts for about 85% of employment. Currently in Ethiopia, women account for 37% of decentralized renewable energy solutions workforce. In most African countries, however, the informal sector is least considered in government policies. And this has resulted in sector injustices where women are the most hard hit. The current energy insecurity will be exacerbated in the absence of specific efforts to ensure equitable transition. So how do we make sure that this doesn't happen? We need to quicken green energy transition by empowering small, medium sector enterprises, youth and women with clean energy access. And there is a need for digital smart energy solutions through green entrepreneurship and increased investment driven by enabling policies. Bearing all of this in mind, INRA developed the Innovate for Clean Agricultural Technologies project, dubbed InfoCat. So really with this project, what we seek to do is to ensure that women are participating in the energy value chain through all levels. Women are users, they are entrepreneurs, they are technicians, and they are policymakers in the energy sector, though not as much as we would like. So one of the goals of our project is to advance women's and youth economic empowerment in the rural areas of 3 countries, Ghana, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire, by promoting low-cost, clean energy-powered technology solutions that increase agricultural productivity and income for smallholder rural farmers. The objectives of the project include to ensure the development of affordable, labor-saving, clean energy agricultural technology to save time, reduce drudgery, and enhance women and youth economic opportunities, as well as in a way that reduces gender imbalances in clean energy agricultural technology. The second objective is to support clean energy technology startups with a focus on women-led companies, and where possible to refine and expand their products, offering to meet the needs of smallholder rural farmers through market intelligence. The picture you can see on your screen is a group of small rural farmers that we interviewed in a rural part of Ghana. And the final objective of the project is to inform gender-sensitive policy reforms that recognize the contribution of clean energy agricultural technology startups to the energy transition and to provide the necessary incentives for them to thrive and grow. So we have three main gender equity and inclusion objectives, and we hope to achieve them through the process of triangulation. So with this project, what we are going to do is we are going to pair women-led green entrepreneurs with more successful green business people, with policymakers, and with scientific researchers. We hope that this process will encourage four things, or will lead to the achievement of four things. The first one is increased women's access and adoption and use of clean agri-tech innovations to improve agricultural efficiency and sustainability. Second, we hope to enhance the economic opportunities for youth and women in clean agri-tech startups. We hope to result in evidence-based gender-sensitive policy reforms that enhance enabling environments for women and youth entrepreneurs in agri-tech startups. And finally, to lead to the transfer of knowledge and skills to improve gendered informational asymmetries and develop women's capacities. The key takeaways from our initial baseline study were that with projects like this, you end up having a catch-22. What does that mean? It means that, well, so we are doing all of this because we want to encourage female green entrepreneurs, but it is difficult to identify those female green entrepreneurs in the first place because it is such a niche area and because of the challenges that they face. So you really need to be creative in how you go about ensuring that, how we needed to be creative in ensuring that our project will be successful. And in order to do that, we realized that it is imperative to include both men and women in the planning, implementation, and evaluation stages of projects. A lot of times when we talk about gender sensitive or gender responsive or transformative projects, we focus on women. But if you want to encourage participation and uptake and to ensure that your project is successful and accepted, you need to include both genders and diverse groups of people at all stages of the project. We also realized that it is important to recognize the different roles, responsibilities, and needs of men and women within these communities. So in the picture you can see on your screen, we realized that there was a lot of time poverty due to traditional domestic responsibilities that women have. And so we went to them instead of asking them to come to us. So we would go to their houses where, as you can see, they were multitasking, they were taking care of kids, they were processing in the pan there, it's cassava that has been granulated, and then they sort of stir it up to make what we call gari. So, and it's a tedious process. So you don't want to go and belabor them further. And also realize that it is incredibly important to be flexible in order to adapt the project. You need to listen to the feedback that you're receiving on the field. For example, we went in thinking that women's agency was limited due to cultural and traditional norms. However, we realized that no, that is actually not the case. What limits them from participation, from access, and from use is limited financial resources. So there are emerging challenges that we identified from going to the field. We realized that a lot of the agricultural activities that these women undertake is rain-fed, and there is very low mechanization. There is extremely limited access to technology, and there's limited access to irrigation and food processing. Finally, there's also the limited technology that exists is also heavily reliant on diesel-powered technologies, and it is quite expensive for them to do that. We also realized that they had a lot of problems with sorting out their agricultural produce, like you can see on the screen. And so we went in with an idea of the kind of technologies that we would need or we would like to see our green entrepreneurs develop. And these include solar-powered irrigation systems like water pumps, solar dryers for food preservation, biogas systems, solar-powered cold storage, solar-powered milling and processing, and then solar-powered water pumping. But it was interesting because a couple of the women actually said to us, their main challenge is that the scarecrows on their farms are proving to be ineffective. It means that their kids have to forgo going to school and stay on the farm to create some noise, which would drive away the pests and the birds that consume their produce. So they would like us to encourage the development of solar or wind-powered noise-making machines and solar or wind-powered sorting machines. And I think it's very important to highlight that women users as part of decentralized renewable energy systems are very important. Their voices are important because you want to create technologies that are actually useful to them and that are actually practical to them on the field. These technologies need to, we went in with sophisticated ideas of what they would need, but what they actually need is simple, affordable, and accessible green technologies. So beyond the work that INRA is doing, I also want to highlight some of the amazing work that is being done on the continent. We have change makers. In Ghana, we have the Global Bamboo Products Limited, and we have Wenyon Co, which are providing alternative sources of energy in Ghana. So instead of the traditional charcoal, which is produced by felling trees and leads to deforestation, these companies are producing bamboo briquettes or briquettes of coal made out of waste products. We also have the inspirational story of Miss Charlotte Magai from Kenya, who has developed Mukuru Clean Cook Stoves, which repurpose locally sourced waste material to manufacture improved, efficient, and reliable cook stoves, which are then distributed to local women business owners. And finally, we have Wind Energy Africa, which is based in Zambia and aims to create 20 community-based distribution hubs, which have pay-as-you-go smartphones, which will be preloaded with starting bundles. And the hope is that these hubs will be a one-stop shop for community energy, water, and connectivity. Notwithstanding the excellent work that is being done, there are several challenges that we face in the inclusion and participation of women in DRE. We have sociocultural norms and gender roles where, as you know, with all societal change, it is quite difficult. It's a slow but sure process, but it's quite challenging in that people resist the change at the forefront. We had one workshop where one of the participants asked us, well, which law should we obey? Should we obey your customary laws, which say that maybe women shouldn't go to the farm at this particular time, or do we obey the law of the land, which says that anyone is free to go anywhere they want at any time? And we said, well, the customary law cannot be in contravention to the state law. So these are some of the issues that you need to address in order to bridge the gap for women's participation in DRE. There are also economic barriers, like I've mentioned. There are limited access to resources, and this results in income inequalities. The third challenge, which is a great one, is educational and skills gap. Even record keeping, balancing out sheets, determining what is the profit, what is the loss, are all challenges. So access to education is a key factor, and we hope to encourage STEM participation of women, because currently there's a lot of underrepresentation. There are also health concerns, because whenever you are dealing with unsustainable symptoms, for example, using charcoal for cooking, it leads to respiratory issues. So there are these kind of health concerns. And there's also the issue of gender-based violence, which is a dire one that needs to be addressed. Finally, we have political and institutional barriers. Currently, women are extremely underrepresented when it comes to policy making and when it comes to being at the table for decision makers. And we also have the issue of parity, where not all female representatives are the most qualified. So it's a dicey situation that we need to look at to ensure that the current situation we have, where there's a lack of gender sensitive policies, is addressed. So the recommendations from our fieldwork and from our research would be, first and foremost, to enhance access to educational skills and development. Secondly, we want to improve access to financial resources. And thirdly, you need to foster community engagement and social change. And finally, support women's entrepreneurship and innovation. And this is what we hope to achieve with our InfoCat project. Because we have identified these barriers, what we will do at the end of our project is to, well, first, let me tackle the education first. Because of the triangulation, there will be knowledge sharing. So we hope to improve the capacity of all green entrepreneurs from beginning to end, from the inception of your project and innovation and technology, all the way through to the end with things such as marketing and scaling up. Secondly, there will be a prize for, we will limit or rather select 10 green innovations and then choose a winner out of these 10 that we will scale up. And the winner will be given a grant. So we hope to address the issue of financial resources with this project. The third thing is to foster community engagement and social change. We are hoping that with the inclusion of policymakers and with the inclusion of diverse participants in this project, we will be able to really drive the message across that gender inclusion will lead to development for everybody, not just one particular group, not just the women. We do not want to further perpetuate gender inequalities within these various communities that we are working in. And then finally, we want to support women's entrepreneurship and innovation, which is the main motivating factor for this InFocus project. So I want to conclude by saying that to expedite women's role in decentralized renewable energy solutions, we require comprehensive and targeted strategies that consider the unique barriers that women face. These challenges are not insurmountable, but if we really want to create a change and if we really want to push female and women's participation in decentralized renewable energy solutions, then it needs to be intentional. We need to look at encouraging their participation throughout the entire value chain, as users, as entrepreneurs, as technicians, and as policymakers. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Maria, for such a unique perspective. We were really hoping to get an insight into developing countries and how they are navigating this change. So in your presentation, you mentioned words like environmental stewardship, but you also mentioned that there shouldn't be a distinction between the state law and customary law. So it seems for women, one of the unique challenges is dealing with the cultural limitations, right? So in navigating this energy transition, do you feel like these changes will be coming from the state so that there should be government action, or will it be more grassroots level where women in local governments are kind of in local districts are kind of taking on the mantle? And so is it more top to bottom or bottom to top? And just in your experiences working in, what have you noticed?
Yes, so in our experience, we've noticed that there's sort of a parallel operation that is going on where you have top to bottom, where there are a lot of government interventions, and there's also a lot of bottom up. But we would say for effectiveness and longevity, and to ensure uptake, to ensure acceptance of these rules, it needs to be more of a bottom up approach. The changes need to come from the community members themselves. What you do not want is to go and speak at them and to them and dictate their way of living. What you want is a sort of communication and a dialogue where they recognize that these changes will be beneficial to them, and you need to understand what kind of changes they need, which is an example of how we went in thinking of highly sophisticated technologies, and they said, no, actually, what we need is very simple and very basic technologies that we can all use. Because what we also realized in our research is that there are a lot of older women who are small rural farmers. And so if you go with highly sophisticated technologies, it's not really going to be useful to them. And to really encourage social change, you need these older, small rural farmers to be inclusive in the discussion for a just transition process.
Thank you so much for that insight, and I will definitely follow up with you in our dedicated question answer session. Thank you for your presentation. And now I would like to call upon our third and final speaker, Isabel, please. Thank you so much, Isabel, for joining us. Isabel Miranda is the Director of Sustainability and Social Performance at IPECA. Her responsibilities include managing the following groups: social responsibility, human rights, supply chain, sustainable development goals, reporting, and health. Isabel is an external affairs professional with over 20 years experience across different industries, with particular emphasis in the oil and gas sector. Her main areas of expertise include government relations, social risk mitigation, and developing strategies to engage with external stakeholders. Prior to IPECA, Isabel has held various senior roles in multinational organizations like BP, ExxonMobil, and Petrofac. Isabel has also worked for the Mexican government at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. She holds a master's degree in political economy, international relations from the London School of Economics and political science. Thank you so much for joining us today, Isabel.
Thank you so much, Sadika, for the opportunity to present to such a STEAM audience and as a great panel. If we go into the next slide, Sadika, and I'm going to provide a bit of a perspective of an industry association. And I think for some of you that don't know us, we were founded 50 years ago at the request of the UN Environmental Programme to be the main link of communication between the oil and gas sector and the UN. So in this 50 years plus, we are the only sustainability association covering both the upstream and downstream, providing guidance across whole project life cycles and the full industry value chain. And we are structuring 4 pillars to deliver this, which you can see on the slide, which is climate, nature, people, and sustainability. If we go into the next slide very briefly, I think what differentiates IPICA from other industry associations is that we are sustainability focused, we are non-lobby, and I think really we have a huge emphasis around collaboration at the heart of what we do. Our membership comprises of more than 1,000 subject matter experts in the topic of sustainability, and we go across the full value chain. Next slide, please. So just to give you a bit of a flavor on our members and very briefly, so we have around 80 members around the world. So our membership really operates in around 180 countries. And we also have a number of associations to be able to leverage not only from our experience, but also more importantly, to be able to transfer knowledge on a lot of the guidance that we also develop. So if we go into our next slide, I'd love to tell you a little bit more about, I think there's previous speakers have talked about the important role of the just transition. And for us as well as IPICA, this has been a key topic that we've been working with our members for the last couple of years. And it's sort of at the heart of our strategy in terms of supporting the energy transition. One of the things that we've done is to develop a statement, which took us a while to put together in terms of having that consensus from members. And our aspiration is to support the oil and gas industry participation and international collaboration to transition to a low carbon world in a way that is just and fair to workforce, communities, and consumers. So really relevant to the gender conversation, and that I will talk a little bit in more detail. We also are an observer of a number of UN processes, including the UNFCCC process. So we've been very active in the different COP processes, providing a convening role for different stakeholders. If we go into the next slide, I'd like to, in my presentation, maybe touch upon on some of the key guidance that I think are relevant from the gender conversation, but also in terms of some of the skills perspectives. And I think meeting the increasing demand for access to safe, clean, and affordable energy while simultaneously curbing emissions from global energy production will require a global range of solutions. As the world moves towards a low carbon energy, alternative energy technologies are becoming an ever more important part of the energy mix. Over the last few decades, oil and gas companies have been increasingly investing in and producing energy through alternative technologies such as wind and solar. The scale of alternative energies necessary to meet this demand to meet the demands of the Paris Agreement will need to take into account climate, environmental, and social risks associated with their development and use. From our perspective, IPICA, and you're having this here on the screen, we developed this guidance on environmental and social good practice for the energy sector. And I guess the key message here is that a lot of the skills that we are seeing that are going to be really relevant for the energy transition are something that are already transferable, and there's a clear overlap between technical and engineering skills. But I think I also would like to emphasize, I think one important aspect which relates to, we tend to be preoccupied with technical, financial, and managerial skills that are needed to propel the energy transition forward. But I think, well, let us not forget some of those soft skills that are often overlooked and that are among the hardest to secure. Some of them are relating to skills to work in multicultural environments. I think Heidi mentioned that a little bit in her presentation. The ability to collaborate between essential actors, skills to engage in meaningful dialogue with communities and indigenous peoples, and also develop diverse workforces. So this is one of the guidance that I think has underpinned some of our work to be able to support our members, but also sort of the broader industry in this regard. If we go into the next slide, please. So a just transition can only be achieved through a full and equal participation, leadership, and decision-making for work that involves women. The Paris Agreement takes into account the imperatives of a just transition of the workforce and the creation of decent work and quality jobs in accordance with nationally defined development priorities. The case for gender-responsive just transition towards low-carbon economies with quality, decent jobs for women and men is grounded on the Paris Agreement, and it's a growing body of data and evidence that underscores the necessity of incorporating gender equality considerations in just transition policies and initiatives. Increasing gender diversity within workforces and in the leadership of organizations are areas that are we can see repeatedly in a number of topics, that not only topics, but areas that member companies are really looking at. To speed up the transition to a green energy sector and economy within the short time frame left for limiting temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius, women need to be equally, fully, and meaningfully included at all stages and levels as leaders and agents of change, designing, implementing, and users of renewable energy technologies and practices. The global transition to sustainable energy presents a particular opportunity for women to advance in this field. The renewable energy industry is already drawing more than 32% of the global workforce, as compared to oil and gas, which at present includes 22%. Although concentrated in administrative rather than technical or managerial jobs, and this is according to a recent IRENA report. Activating and accessing the opportunities of a sustainable energy transition is paramount. It is estimated that the green transition to a global economy will require an investment of $50 trillion by 2050. So it really reflects sort of the scale of the investment that will be requiring. If we go into the next slide, please. So what needs to happen to ensure that women take an active leadership role in a just transition? Firstly, there are systemic issues that need to be taken into account. Women's rights, access to education with an emphasis on STEM subjects. And our previous speaker very, very clearly spoke about this from a human rights lens, which was, I completely agree. The realization of women's right to work and rights are critical to ensure a just transition of the workforce and the creation of decent work and quality jobs in accordance with nationally defined development priorities. There are other things that can happen at the company level, which we are seeing taking place in IPICA from member companies. So I'll give you a little bit of a perspective of what we have seen, which I think some of the previous speakers have also referred to. But I think one of them is to close data gaps to monitor and assess changes in the level and quality of gender responsive in the world of work. This is starting to happen, and I think there's a lot more scrutiny also from a number of legislation looking at expectations around gender workforce to be disclosed and explained. The INA policies and programs to enhance women representation in renewable energy sector. This can be part of the recruitment and retention strategies and reentry, career advancement and leadership, education and training. One aspect that I would like to highlight, I think it relates to inclusive community and stakeholder engagement. A gender-responsive just transition relies on social dialogue and the meaningful engagement of all affected stakeholders, especially women and girls whose voice and agency have been and continue to be undermined and underrepresented. Women leadership and influence in the design, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation of just transition initiatives, policies, and programs will help ensure their effectiveness, as well as equal participation and benefits for women and girls in all their diversity. And perhaps just to share a little bit, that some of the central themes that have been shared by our members include the cultivation of inclusive leadership, which I think has also been mentioned briefly as one of the key corporate values of diversity and inclusion. This supports and ensures that gender equality efforts are integrated into the strategic fabric of the organization, driving systemic change. Another key area of focus of our members is the implementation of robust gender policies. These policies are designed not only to support women career growth, but also to foster an environment where every individual, regarding of the gender, age, nationality, or background, has equal access to opportunities. Our members are actively engaged in promoting STEM education and leadership development among women. There are numerous examples of programs in Africa, the Middle East, and America, and such programs are aimed to strengthening female presence and empowerments. And I guess also to highlight that I think a number of our members are very active, and I think there are a number of benchmarks, most notably, I think some of you are aware with the WBA gender benchmark, and some of our members also, I think, are considering as examples in terms of how they are leading, particularly in areas such as leadership in women empowerment and also board representation. I'm going to conclude maybe just to give you a couple of more examples that I thought might be relevant to share if we go into the next slide. Thank you. So IPICA produces an annual reporting survey. We have a very active reporting working group that identifies trends in sustainability reporting and practices from members. And I think one of the things to reflect on is that SDG 5 regarding gender equality was identified as one of the top 5 priority SDGs for our members. Almost all our members disclose their social performance targets on gender diversity and inclusion. And as I said, some of them also participate quite actively in some of the benchmarks and indexes that are relevant to gender. Part of this presentation includes some of the QR codes if you're more interested in looking into some of our reports. And lastly, and with this I will conclude, if we go into our next slide, IPICA has been also doing a lot of work around the SDG, and we have been working on it and developed a number of reports. The most recent one took place in 2020, where we basically we identify how IPICA as an industry association can work with the sector towards the fulfillment of the SDGs. And one of the latest report very clearly emphasizes how our members promote health, well-being, and social inclusion of workforces and local communities relating to operations. So very much linked to the topic of gender. And I think overall how also the access to energy is really so relevant to and an imperative to fulfill the rest of the Sustainable Development Goals. And with this, I'm going to conclude, and thank you so much for inviting me to present.
Thank you so much, Isabel. Thank you for your presentation. And I did actually have a follow-up question. So you said that you're noticing that there is a higher uptake of women entering the workforce in renewable energy field. However, is it also like traditional oil and gas? Is it also, are the women in technical sphere, or are they in the administrative tasks? And how can we I guess, bridge the gap of taking these women that are in the technical field and retaining them until they reach management level. So where in the career graph do women start falling off?
I do have the data in terms of where are they falling off, but I think to your question in terms of how we can retain them, I think there are a number of incentives that can take place, and I think a lot of what really essential in terms of their approach, in terms of nurturing, in terms of their career path, their opportunities to grow, and also I think as I mentioned there, I think the green economy is bringing so many other opportunities where I think some of those transferable skills that are already being considered in oil and gas can be applied to the low carbon economy. I would say stress, Sarika, as well, as I mentioned, not only about the technical skills, but I think from a sustainability angle, I think we're seeing that those are jobs too where women have played a very important role, and I think they will be increasingly more important. But I think I would go back to maybe what Heidi said at the beginning. I think the quality of leadership at the top is, I think, very important to send the signal of how you can really retain talent in the sector. And I think there are a number of initiatives that are taking place in terms of collaboration where that is being nurtured.
Thank you so much, Isabel, for that. And now if I could just ask all of our panelists to join us for our question and answer session so that we can go in. If anyone has questions, please type in and we can go ahead and start asking more in-depth questions about your presentation. So thank you so much for what has been very interesting and so many different diverse perspectives. Heidi, perhaps I'll go to you first. Do you think there is a greater potential for women to enter the renewable energy market? If so, what potential barriers do you see for women entering the renewable energy sector? And given your experience working in oil and gas and now making this leap.
Yeah, so I really do think there are a lot of opportunities for women in renewable energy. There are new companies and they're creating a new culture and new policies and attitudes towards diversity and inclusion right from the start. So it's a new space and there's lots of room for women to participate in that by design. I think that also women are attracted to the space. It is something that's important to have a just transition, and they're really motivated to participate. I'm seeing a lot of founders of renewable energy companies, women leading those companies, starting those companies for a bunch of reasons. They're personally motivated, and perhaps they do have transferable skills from traditional energy sectors, and they're putting those skills to use in their own new way in the energy transition. So yeah, I think there's a lot of opportunity, and it's really encouraging. The numbers are showing that in just a very short amount of time compared with legacy energy. But some of and of course, women attract other women, so it will only increase in momentum, in my opinion. Some of the barriers, I think, really, some things still persist. We have a smaller talent pool for women graduating in science, technology, engineering, and math. So, if we have a smaller talent pool of graduates and smaller number of women in industry, it's going to be hard to get the numbers up and women participating. I think also there's still some barriers or some biases in access to capital. So those things persist in the financial space, and women sometimes struggle to get in the room to access that capital to progress. So thank you.
Thank you so much. So there are quite a few questions in the question box and this is to all three of you, is with our focus on gender responsiveness and gender parity, does that risk destabilizing, or does it? I think the concern is, should we focus on that, or should we focus on including all genders. And I think, Maria, you mentioned that it can't just be about women, but you can't discount the role that men are already playing in this. So how is there a distinction between gender parity and gender mainstreaming? And Heidi, I think this goes to the point where you mentioned that in the oil rig, when you started, it wasn't built for women. There were no restrooms that you can use. So this is an open question on how we navigate gender and social considerations in the energy transition.
Maybe, yes, I could take a first stab at it. Yes, I would say there's a distinction between gender parity and gender mainstreaming. One of the main dangers with gender parity is that if you are not careful, what you can have is tokenism, where you have women participating in various sectors at various levels just to tick the box and say, we have the number of women, there was an equal panel, we didn't have a manual, things like that. But what you really want is to have effective gender mainstreaming, where you tackle the issues at the root cause, where you have male allies, because in order to create lasting change, you need all people to come on board. It needs to include youth, it needs to include children. So there needs to be a systemic and holistic approach towards gender inclusion, not just gender parity. And we've seen that, for example, when it comes to policymakers, where we have some parliaments that say, oh, well, we have this vast number of women who make up part of our legislative team. And then you realize that the policies that they come up with don't really address the specific needs of the people on the ground. We must always remember that the reason we are doing all of this is for the benefit of the local people, for the grassroots people. And I think one of the ways to ensure that we do that is by gender mainstreaming. I mean, gender parity is a part of it, but we need to look at a holistic approach.
Thank you. Isabel, Heidi, do you want to come in, or should I move on to the next question?
Can move on to the next question for me.
Okay, Isabel, I will come to you. Given your extensive experience in social risk mitigation in the oil and gas sector, what are the key social risks that need to be addressed during the energy transition?
Thank you, Sadika. Well, I think they're probably not a lot of them not dissimilar what we already seeing in the oil and gas sector. I think they are probably, some of them can be enhanced, particularly when you're looking at some of the activities that are taking place in places where they're completely new geographies, and some of them with areas where I think they're more vulnerable communities. So I think, especially, I think with the energy transition and sort of that expansion into looking at minerals as well, I think that that's probably an element where looking at sort of that indigenous peoples, vulnerable communities, land resettlement. But I think issues about biodiversity, I think it's very much local specific, and I would probably argue that what is important is, and it's something that is, again, in terms of being able to transfer some of that knowledge, is, being able to develop a very thorough impact assessment and also a very thorough human rights due diligence as part of any project. But I would say that it really is very much context specific.
Thank you. I think definitely one of the themes of this webinar is that a term as broad as the energy transition, and of course gender and social considerations, is very context specific. And what's happening in Canada is very different than what's happening in India or in Africa. So yes, I thank you. I think my next question would be to Maria. Maria, you mentioned the use of new technologies, and in some of the projects that you've undertaken, how do you ensure the sustainability and long-term use of these new technologies? And is there any process in place for post-implementation, like monitoring or compliance?
Thank you very much. So one of the things we are doing is to ensure that from the onset, the technologies are affordable and accessible. We hope that in doing this, it will create demand for the technologies that we have, because we realize that once there's the demand, then people will then continually ask for the technologies that we are hoping to produce. And one way to ensure that we are able to meet the rising demand is that we are partnering with policymakers, which is the governments, in the hope that they would assist us in terms of scaling up the technologies that are developed. This would also be important because we are partnering with local governments, which would help us to monitor the progress of the progress and use of the technologies that are developed. So post-implementation, there's definitely a plan for monitoring and evaluation. We want to monitor how the projects are scaled up, the uptake, and even potential opportunities to tweak and improve them as time goes along. And we are operating this project in 3 countries currently, like I said, Ghana, Senegal, and Cote d'Ivoire. But depending on the results that come out of this project, we are hoping to scale up and possibly extend it to different areas of the continent.
Thank you so much. In your experience, and this is again an open question, have you found there to be any concrete example of a gender responsive strategy or a policy that you have seen or that has led to, like, tangible change? Any examples from countries or local governments that you've noticed or observed? That's okay. I can move on to the next question. And this is actually, I wanted to, I don't know if you can see my screen. Yes. So this is actually, when I was searching for images for this webinar, I came across, women in renewable energy in developed countries and the distinction between developing countries. And I wanted to know, are we doing a disservice by using words such as energy transition and gender responsive in such a broad way that it doesn't consider the contextual differences? And how can we bridge this gap? So any comments on these images are welcome.
So I think, energy transition is going to be, different in every part of the world, and even in, different micro regions, I guess, within a certain part of the world. So I think there's, it's going to be different for everyone. And there's going to be a lot of different strategies. And that's what's so interesting and so, I think, exciting about energy transition. It's not one solution, it's many solutions done in a lot of different ways. And there's going to be sort of larger solutions and smaller solutions. And all of these solutions have to contribute to solve this problem. So there's going to be a bunch of diversity in how we progress this forward. So in Canada and North America, where I'm from, there's a lot of existing infrastructure, and both infrastructure and people that have that are currently serving energy needs, right? So it's how do you repurpose that infrastructure? How do you amend it? How do you build new infrastructure to incorporate new technologies and new renewable energy solutions? So how do you get it into the current system, I think, is a challenge. And how you repurpose people and skill sets to do that. So it's not so much starting everything new, it really is a sort of incorporating a lot into the existing infrastructure. And I think that could be quite different from other parts in the world. We already have sort of this ecosystem that provides energy, and how do you supplement it and then eventually transition into new forms of energy with that existing framework.
If I can add briefly to that, just to say that, when you look at the global north, they are transitioning from depending on or a heavy reliance on carbonized industries. So they are decarbonizing. They are looking towards moving away from their heavy reliance on these carbon industries. The African context, we are not heavily carbonized in the first place. So people often ask, what are you transitioning from? Because you don't even have point A to transition onto point B. So our transition pathway is quite different from the rest of the world or from the global north. Your question was on whether we are doing a disservice by using these terms broadly. I don't necessarily think so, but I think what we need to do is to have contextual definitions of what these concepts mean for us, which is why, for example, our Dare to Share workshop was quite important, because yes, there's a broad definition of what a just transition is, but for you, the average policymaker, for you, the average green entrepreneur, what does being part of the just transition pathway mean for you? That leads to ownership, and then you can begin to cut and drop the pathways that would result in this. So for us, I think it's really an opportunity to leapfrog, to identify the areas that are missing, and to try and develop technologies that would address our specific needs. So there is space within this broad spectrum for that.
Probably just to complement what Maria said, because I was going to probably mention that sort of that contextual perspective, and I think one other element is probably around the opportunities around collaboration and capacity building. From the work of IPICA, we've been, for instance, engaging through some of our partners with emerging producers, and I think there's a real opportunity there in terms of for them looking at this in a way that really reflects their own contextual realities and supports communities, local content, etc.
Thank you. Just to follow up on the capacity building part, Isabel, when you talk about what do you see it more as being a capacity building from global north to global south, or do you see it more as being regional capacity building? So
I think they both can learn from each other, and I think also learn from the mistakes from the global north. I think I've heard someone speaking recently saying some of these emerging producers is like a white canvas. So it really I think there is probably from a policy or local content some reference points, but I think they really need to be contextualized, and also I think really taking into account that important piece, which is access to energy, and that different geographies will take different, they will require a different time scale and different, access to different technologies. So, but I think the incentives in terms of policy and obviously finance as well, which is really important to allow them to make that change, is going to be critical.
Thank you so much. And for what's been a really interesting question and answer session, before we run out of time, could I ask you all to just share one key takeaway from today's session? Heidi, would you like to go first?
Sure, I'll go first. I just think this has been so valuable, and the global perspectives are key. We need to collaborate and have these conversations in forums like this with people from different parts of the world, with different expertise, different experience, different skill set. So more of this is definitely required, and I think there's an appetite for it. So I just wanted to thank my fellow panelists and you for this opportunity to have these conversations and continue this in the future. Thank you.
I think from my side, I would say probably, again, I think that element of dialogue, I think the whole area around a just transition and being able to provide that inclusion of different perspectives is just going to be so important. I would also probably emphasize the opportunities around partnerships. I think they are really going to be critical for a successful energy transition. And that is also, sort of that maybe the broader perspective around gender considerations, as we mentioned during this hour. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I would also echo the sentiments of Isabel and Heidi Lynn. Yes, it's been a very engaging and interesting discussion, very enlightening to hear the different perspectives from a diverse group of people. So more of this, hopefully.
Thank you so much. It's actually been so fascinating to listen to, three experts from three different parts of the world share their experience, and as well as how we can navigate the steps ahead. It was really interesting to know about how it has to be contextual, it has to be founded on partners, and of course the distinction between gender parity and gender mainstreaming, which I found was very nuanced. So thank you so much. Before we end, I just wanted to share with our participants some follow-up, just next steps. I don't know if you can see my screen yet. Yes, so just to remind you all that you will get a follow-up email, which will have a link to our to the recording of this webinar, as well as to all the presentations that were shared today. You will also get in that email a link to our evaluation survey. Now, it's a short feedback form, and if you complete it, you will get a certificate of participation. So your certificate of participation should be in your inbox within 10 days of completing the evaluation survey. Our next webinar is on the topic Make or Break, how the legal landscape enables the energy transition. This will be sometime in September. Because you have joined our webinar today, you will also receive our monthly newsletter updates. So it'll give you information on everything that's relevant around energy and environment. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much to our all-women panel for being so fantastic and so interesting. I would also really like to thank our supervisor, program coordinator, Ms. Marisol Estrella, as well as our intern, Chimuka Chulu, without whom we wouldn't have been able to have this webinar today. So thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you in September for our last and final session of the Global Webinar Series 2024. Thank you.